At one stage in the story...
Do not persist in dubbing this eccentricity a story.
The narrative comes to a definite
Narrative?
halt.
It never takes off. Like the London mail coach I once caught, which remained mired in mud outside Grantham.
And one of the characters continued...
More wooden puppets jerked around on visible strings than characters.
To wit, Corporal Trim, the servant of Tristram's father...
Wasn't the sexton in that political romance also called Trim?
This Trim discovers a sermon by Yorick.
The Shakespearean clown? No, the rural parson.
Trim delivers this sermon in full. The theme is the abuses of conscience. And I was sure I had read it before.
To include a sermon in a smutty tale is nothing short of blasphemy.
On the contrary, it might be thought such an introduction would raise the moral tone of any volume.
Or it might be the greatest outrage against sense and decency that has been offered since the first establishment of Christianity.
Passing, of course, over the persecutions of the Emperor Nero, the martyrdom of the Protestant faithful, and the torture of the Spanish Inquisition.
If this inclusion is designed to be uplifting, how come it is delivered by a comic manservant and one of the listeners drops off to sleep?
You sold a political romance, didn't you, Dr. Hinxman?
Very few copies. The work could find hardly any readers. A box would still remain gathering dust in my storeroom, were it not for the Archbishop's injunction to put the tracts on the bonfire.
And did you publish it?
Certainly not. It was, if I recall, entirely paid for by the writer himself.
Come to think of it, I too recognised a familiarity. I'm sure I heard this sermon preached some years since. Do you remember the abuses of conscience, Dr. Bridges?
It was given as the annual assize sermon in the Minster about a decade ago.
Preached by a certain prebendary before 1,000 witnesses ready to give oath of it.
And printed by him for subsequent sale.
And who was the divine in question?
I'll not dissemble, gentlemen. That too was the work of the Reverend Mr. Sterne.
So Sterne is Yorick.
And Yorick is Sterne.
Ergo, Sterne must be the author of the life and opinions of Tristram Shandy Gentleman.
Well, Dr. Hinxman?
The condition of publication requires me to preserve the anonymity of the author.
Well, Dr. Bridges?
The condition of amity requires me to preserve my silence on this matter.
Even among we good humourists?
How long do you think the mystery would remain within these four walls?
So, that's your opinion of your fellows.
Surely you must have been vouchsafed the identity of the writer, Dr. Hinxman.
I am a bookseller merely. Printed commodities arrive in my shop, and I do my level best to make sure they leave. In this instance, I am pleased to say they are leaving with prodigious alacrity.
I hear neither of you denying it is by Sterne.
Good Parson Sterne, the Yorkshire Yorick. I'll raise a glass to him for one.
I am certainly not confirming this man, who, like myself, is a humble and unworthy labourer in the clerical vineyard, to be the author.
Well, if it really is by him, he'll no longer have to preach in the Minster for £1 per pop.
I propose we mobilise and examine what has already been put before us in somewhat of a forensic manner.
Should we not respect the author's wish to remain in the shadows?
Over and above our desire for knowledge? Never.
Let us together sift the evidence scientifically and soberly in peace and harmony.
Pass the bottle peacefully, Dr. Smithson.
Harmoniously, Dr. Cauntley.
This is as notable and curious a disputation as ever was engendered in the womb of speculation.
What clues thus far point to the identity of the author?
Consider the Yorkshire connection.
There is one?
The book is put on sale this very day in York, and nowhere else as yet. I submit that, therefore, the book must have been printed here.
Dr. Hinxman?
An unproven hypothesis.
But not an unreasonable one.
Possibly not.
A work of such quality can be produced by only one printing house within these city walls, that of your late predecessor in the office of Club Secretary, Dr. Newton.
Caesar Ward, rest his soul.
And now managed by his widow.
Did Anne Ward supply you with your copies, Dr. Hinxman?
That I can surely verify. Ward's is without doubt the finest printing house in the county.
If it is printed in York and sold in York, then the writer must likely be from York.
More vain speculation.
Not at all. This is confirmed in the book itself.
How so?
The action.
Or total lack thereof.
The action of the tale is indubitably set in Yorkshire.
From my perusal, incomplete and intermittently uncomprehending, I'll be the first to concur, the location is surely never specified.
Not explicitly.
The actual name of the county is even at one point disguised by a discreet dash.
Ah, but remember the chapter concerning the Shandy family's dash from London to fulfil the father's desire that the child be born in his own country house, in spite of the not unreasonable objections of the expecting mother.
Oh, yes. A quaint conceit.
From details of the journey north, I am strongly of the opinion that it must be inferred that Shandy Hall can be located nowhere but in our own county. This is without doubt the work of a native resident.
We've already discussed the inclusion of the sermon.
Endless is the search of truth.
Which was incontrovertibly written, delivered, and subsequently published by the Reverend Mr. Sterne.
But which might, of course, have been included as a quotation and an homage to an undoubtedly skilled practitioner of the art of the pulpit.
Why would any author put forward at such length any other man's prose but his own?
Parson Yorick is described as a victim of clerical conspiracy and lack of preferment.
Not unlike the vicar of Sutton and Stillington himself.
Well deserved, no doubt.
The writer observes of Yorick, if I can find the passage. They had smote his root, and then he fell, as many a worthy man had fallen before him.
If he's caught in sympathy, he'll get none from me.
Then we have the coincidence of the two characters nominated Trim.
And the perceived and certain similarity of style between this work and Sterne's earlier effusion this year in his political romance.
Might not the raucous reception and fiery treatment of that controversial piece provide an explanation as to why the author chooses, in this instance, to hide his identity?
Particularly given the amusingly indelicate contents,
The epigraph is in Greek,
betokening a classical education.
yet the work is quite approachable by the unlearned English reader.
Something to be thankful for. I will buy a copy, Dr. Hinxman.
In spite of passages written in Greek and French.
Surely it must have been penned by a university man.
Such as Sterne.
A scholar of Jesus College, Cambridge.
Such as Sterne.
A clerk in holy orders.
Such as Sterne.
A clergyman's pen should be dedicated to the production of sermons and morally uplifting tracts with a secure scriptural foundation.
All roads lead to Mr. Sterne.
Well, Dr. Hinxman?
Well, Dr. Bridges?
Should it transpire that this minor prebendary is the concealed identity under discussion, then my estimation of the man tumbles yet further than it has been heretofore. For he must have been engaged in the production of this humbuggery at the very time sore afflictions were visited upon his poor wife.
You know the good lady.
Very few are fortunate enough to escape crossing the threshold of an apothecary's emporium,
Mrs. Sterne was your patient?
as has been near everybody around this table.
What was her terrible infirmity?
Truly, Secretary, delicacy forbids.
Sounds as if you're speaking of a female malady.
Oh no, I can say with total certainty the visitation of such a condition takes no account of gender.
Come now, no secrets among fellow inductees.
It seems to me as if this entire evening thus far has been beset by secrecy.
Not for much longer, if I have any say in the matter.
Well, Dr. Hinxman?
I assert I am merely the vendor.
Well, Dr. Bridges?
I assert I have not been a reader.
Pray reveal whatsoever you are privy to, Dr. Garencieres.
It was, in fact, emerods.
What are odds?
The grapes of wrath.
Eh?
Piles.
Is that so?
A perfectly natural occurrence,
As is childbirth, as depicted in Tristram Shandy.
but not something to be made an object of amusement. Rather, a medical condition to be written about by none other than medical authorities for the enlightenment of their fellow professionals.
Preferably in Latin.
Ass fruit.
Your coyness does you no credit, apothecary. Are not what we plain-speaking folk call piles openly mentioned in Scripture?
Is this so, Reverend Doctor?
Indeed it is. As recounted in the first book of Samuel, when the Philistines take away the sacred Ark of the Covenant and sacrilegiously install it in the temple of Dagon, their fish-headed idol. The Lord of hosts smites both young and old with, and I quote from memory, emerods in their secret parts, and the cry went up to heaven.
I've no doubt of it.
What I heard is that the lady went raving mad.
It surprises me not a jot that such small swellings could produce such a monstrous effect.
Rumour had it she came to imagine herself the Queen of Bohemia, necessitating confinement in the house of a lunatic doctor.
That would have given him some peace and quiet.
So your prescription served scant solution.
It was not a result of emerods, believe me. Diseases of the brain are beyond my capabilities. I may know the cause, but I know not the cure.
Then what else could have been the cause of such peculiar behaviour?
Word is, Elizabeth Sterne caught her husband in bed with the maid.
Calumny, vile rumour and hearsay. Take it back, sir.
It was on good authority from one of his parishioners.
The wife's misfortune cannot in any manner be attributed to the husband's behaviour.
So, you dispute that, on account of him, she was shut up in a madhouse?
For a short while only, due to a stroke of the palsy, which could be the lot of any unfortunate creature. I am happy to report the dear soul has made a complete recovery and is living in Mint Yard.
Where she must have become aware of her husband openly cavorting with the delightful Miss Formantle.
The talk of York.
A divine should at all times exercise prudence.
In the case of this divine, it was Kitty being exercised.
If my worthy friend found solace in squiring this songstress,
Young enough to be his daughter.
it was to surely fill an uncomfortable gap in the poor man's heart. It is not good for man to be alone.
It is contrary to the 7th commandment to commit adultery.
Companionship should not be mistaken for concupiscence.
But such open, foolish courtship was, for a man of the cloth known throughout the diocese, in the very least somewhat incautious.
Scandalous, I'd call it.
I have my friend's word there was never any impropriety committed.
Sterne's conduct became a subject of widespread speculation, however it might be characterised.
Such idle gossip should be beneath men of good heart, such as ourselves.
I have every sympathy with the man's philandering. I too have crossed paths with the wife, in a professional capacity.
Mrs. Sterne has many virtues.
Aye, but they stand like quills upon the fretful porcupine, ready to go forth in sharp arrows on the least supposed offence.
I've never known her to have done a wrong thing.
Aye, but she does right things in a very unpleasing manner.
In my estimation, she is a woman of great integrity.
In my experience, the only way to avoid a quarrel with her is to keep a due distance. My opinion is as diametrically opposite to yours as east is from west.
Perhaps she has more respect for her apothecary than for her woolen draper.
I'll allow the fellow is Kitty with full understanding.
Libertine.
Now, there again. Another mirror held up to life. In the book, there's reference to a shadowy beauty with whom our first-person narrator is heartily enamoured, but with whom he denies any wrongdoing.
Dear Jenny?
Indeed. Let me find the passage. Here I have it. Indulge me for a moment. Not that I can be so vain or unreasonable as to desire you should think that my dear, dear Jenny is my kept mistress. No, that would be flattering my character in the extreme, and giving it an air of freedom which perhaps it has no kind of right to. All I contend is that you, or the most penetrating spirit upon earth, should know how this matter really stands. Is there anything unnatural or extravagant in the supposition that my dear, dear Jenny may be my friend? Surely a friendship between the two sexes may subsist and be supported without anything but that tender and delicious sentiment which ever mixes in our friendship where there is a difference of sex. Let me entreat you to study the pure and sentimental parts of the best French romances. It will really astonish you to see with what a variety of chaste expressions this delicious sentiment, which I have the honour to speak of, is dressed out.
Methinks the villain doth protest too much.
I contend that Shandy's Jenny is none other than Sterne's Kitty.
Was she also partial to dining on onion soup?
The road stops at Sterne.
Well, Dr. Hinxman?
Admit it, the writer of a political romance and Tristram Shandy are one and the same.
I do concur the evidence is mounting.
Well, Dr. Bridges?
Admit it, Parson Yorick is Laurence Sterne in disguise.
Those are your words.
Which you can gainsay no longer.
Well, Dr. Bridges?
Well, Dr. Hinxman,